Watchers in the Fourth Dimension.
Go that way and we'll call it east.
Why not call it north? Hard.
He died.
How did he die?
He died.
I didn't invent the rules, I just enforced them.
Hello and welcome back to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension. I'm Anthony.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Riley, and they're only economy class. What's all the fuss about?
This episode, Season 17, dials up the campiness as we discuss Nightmare of Eden. Anyway, before we get on to that, Riley's going to take a look at the mail.
Thanks, Anthony. We have some mail on our episode on the Big Finish audio story, The Antimatter, as well as our episode on Destiny of the Daleks. But first, The Antimatter. John Thomas Casey says, I'm glad they got in a set of stories with Mary Tam. She is my favorite Romana. I agree that she does well, though I do not think that, like Tom Baker himself, she might have eased more into the part, and the writers could have learned how best to work with her new voice. I do think that sometimes it takes a while for these performers to get back into their roles they played long time ago. Nathan Law says, thank God that Anthony finally let you guys listen to a Fourth Doctor Big Finish that wasn't written by Nick Briggs.
Dang.
Oh, just wait. The guy's a fine director and a great voice actor, but man, his writing is terrible. Anyhow, you can't go wrong with John Dorney, even if this isn't one of his best. It's still really good at what it's trying to do, and that's pretty fun. Adam Quinton Wright says, I really love this entry because it was Mary Tam's last time to shine. I grow so much more affectionate for Tom Baker when listening to these because it gives him a chance to continue to make a mark. Now let's move into our mail on Destiny of the Daleks. Harry Hussey says, hi, Anthony, Julie, and Riley. Just a few words about Peter Straker, who played the leader of the Movellans. He was a singer and actor who became friendly with Freddie Mercury in the mid-70s. Freddie managed to get him a record deal at EMI and produce an album for him, but most of Straker's success seems to have been in the West End. While I can't count in terms of this story, I wonder, would the likes of this add to the can't count otherwise? I love when we get little tidbits of information like this added on. I don't know about you guys. It's just really fascinating.
No, really love that.
Yeah. Jamie Revelle says, I described the Rebus operation as a wholly fun start to a 2/3 fun season. And I wasn't wrong. So I have to say that this is a generally weak start to a 2/3 weak season.
Damn.
Having said which, even if the plot makes no sense, it's not as bad as it might be. There are moments of fun, and I really like the design of the Movellans, which couldn't be any more screamingly 70s if it tried. Yes, it's the start of a period where the Daleks get repetitive and dull, at least in my opinion, but it could be a lot worse. 5 out of 10 disco queens with pink plastic guns from me. Mark Russell says, I know Tim Barlow, who played, I believe it was Tyson, as the big coat-wearing, pump-action, shotgun-wielding pensioner, Mr. Treacher and Hot Fuzz.
Oh my god, yes.
I know, I don't know if everyone remembers that, but that's wonderful. I like that. Dan Boris says, Ulan Kolafed isn't just something Douglas Adams made up. It is a direct reference to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He is described as the author of the trilogy of philosophical blockbusters entitled Where God Went Wrong, Some More of God's Greatest Mistakes, and Who is this God person anyway?
Love it. And Ulan Kalufid, I believe.
Kalufid.
Yeah, Ulan Kalufid. Yes, I'd forgotten. I mean, I love Hitchhikers, and I've read the books more times than I can count. I've watched the TV show more times than I can count. And I'd forgotten that. So thank you for the reminder.
Yes. Mark Dunstan says, not the best of the season. Those Daleks look very tired and old. The planet scenes were good and looked great on film, but it looked really cheap. The androids looked like rejects from Top of the Pops. I would give it 5 hair beads out of 10. Jamie Carlson says, as a robotics engineer, I can confirm that putting a hat over a robot's camera is quite effective in vision impairment. The Daleks being treated as robots is very confusing, but the fashion sense of the disco Movellans and Romana's pink coat makes up for it. 8 rock, paper, scissors out of 10. Doctor Who 60s, 70s, and 80s says, like Anthony, this was a favorite as a kid. I was 6 when it was first broadcast, but suspect my memories of it are from the repeat showing the next summer. It was my first Dalek story, and I absolutely loved it. That episode 1 cliffhanger with the black pulsing walls will live with me forever. Unlike Anthony, the nostalgia is still going strong. I'm not blind to its fault, but this will always be a favorite. 10 out of 10! Ill-fitting masks. Wow.
10
out of 10. Okay, then. The 12th Rising says, I know Destiny of the Daleks gets a lot of flack, but I think it's a very enjoyable and fun story. The first episode is a master class of build-up and tension sprinkled with Douglas Adams' humor, and the cliffhanger is a classic. The quality of the remaining 3 episodes vary, but it's still very enjoyable to watch. Lala Ward is an immediate hit as the second Romana, and there is clear chemistry between her and Baker. I wonder why. I know some folks say it looks shoddy, but I remember reading that the producer Graham Williams spent as much money as the budget would allow and was frustrated he couldn't get more. But the Daleks have been stuck underground for years, so the look of the sets goes with the storyline. I also really like the use of Steadicam for the first time. The low shots of the Daleks increase their air of menace, and the location filming in Dorset is very effective. I agree with the Steadicam. That is a good quality of that. Beardo Beatnik says, disco mop-haired alien robots with bland outfits. Sets so cheap and badly lit you'd think it was a high school production. Plot so bare and cheesy it tastes like store-brand American cheese.
Wow.
Yeah, harsh. Thank Davros for the little moments of joy in this tedious, joyless affair. But thanks to you, wonderful people, for suffering through it with us. The rating is 3 out of 10 Rick James robots on Valium. I tell you, have been a lot of varied opinions on this one, and there's a couple more. Chat Grande 67 is quite direct and to the point when he says, Davros should have stayed dead in his bunker. Totally spoiled the previous Dalek story by just having him wake up again. Awful! !
Yeah, okay.
Guy Lambert says, I don't usually hate Doctor Who stories, but there's something about this one that I loathe. Oh, yeah. It's to do with the tone of it, the vibe, that feeling of cheapness and emptiness. This is the first episode you've done where I felt that vibe drain you all too. Wow. Roll on to Paris. Yes, hinting at City of Death. All right, almost done. Keith Burton says, this is one of those rare occasions where I'm going to profoundly disagree with the watchers. Not disagree, profoundly disagree. I know this is an average at best serial that is mostly just reheated leftovers from previous Dalek stories, but I love and adore every ridiculous moment of it. Having avidly watched a series of summer reruns in August 1979, this was the first story I sat down and watched as an eager young fan. It has everything a 10-year-old boy would want to see. Daleks, explosions, jokes, Tom Baker, more explosions. Unlike Anthony, my childhood nostalgia hasn't taken a single step backwards. I loved it then, and it's remained a lovely comfort blanket of a story ever since. 9 one-armed, sexually androgynous, emotionless, homicidal disco robots out of 10.
I mean, Keith is spot on that as a preteen kid, this is kind of perfect.
Yeah.
But, you know,
we grow up.
You two have given me some flack over the years for my nostalgia blindness. But, you know, I think I showed with Destiny of the Daleks, I can turn on my objectivity and did. So I'm just going to say, give me some credit for that, please, guys.
And fitting into that theme, Austin D. Patterson says, gotta agree with Anthony on this one. One of my favorites as a kid, but the more I watch it as an adult, the lower it drops in my ranking. Aesthetic-wise, though, it serves as great wallpaper. And that is the end of the mail of a very, I would say, perhaps contentious voicing of opinions on Destiny of the Daleks. Over to you.
Yeah, certainly some varied opinions there, and thank you for that, Riley. As a reminder to you, dear listener, we really do love getting your feedback, thoughts, comments, and questions. And as you've just heard, we do try and read out as many of them as possible on the show. So please do get in touch with us. You can contact us through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Watchers4D, or you can email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. Additionally, we would love it if you subscribe to the podcast if you're not already doing so, and if you dropped us a review or rating on your podcast platform of choice. Both of those things really do help spread the word of the podcast. Heading behind the scenes on Nightmare of Eden. Now, this kind of takes us back to the scripting phase of Season 16's The Armageddon Factor, when the writing partnership of Bob Baker and Dave Martin broke down. This was the end of Dave Martin's association with Doctor Who. But Bob Baker decided to continue developing additional proposals for the show. In 1978, he attended a party for the show's 15th anniversary, where producer Graham Williams explained that he and new script editor Douglas Adams were seeking cost-effective scripts for season 17 in order to counter the impact of high inflation on the show's budget. With this in mind, Baker submitted a storyline initially titled Nightmare of Evil. It dealt with illegal drugs, which Adams felt would form the basis of an original and relevant Doctor Who narrative. Baker also found inspiration in the disaster movie genre, which had become very popular in the 70s thanks to such box office hits as The Poseidon Adventure, Airport, and The Towering Inferno. The Continuous Event Transmuter, or CET machine, was suggested by articles that Baker had read concerning holograms. Holography had become a practical reality in 1962, and Denis Gabor, who was a Hungarian scientist who had fled to England to escape the Nazis, had been awarded the 1971 Nobel Prize in Physics in recognition of his decade's pioneering work in the field. Baker was commissioned to expand Nightmare of Evil into full scripts at the beginning of February 1979. At this point, the title got changed to Nightmare of Eden because Douglas Adams felt that Nightmare of Evil was a tautology. By now, it was very clear that the first two serials of season 17 would cost quite a bit of money. As such, Williams was keen that the year's fourth and fifth serials be made as cheaply as possible in order to save money for the season finale. Nightmare of Eden was, of course, earmarked for the fourth slot. Assigned as director was Alan Bromley, who'd previously worked on season 11's The Time Warrior. Bromley was by this stage mostly retired, but still called upon to do occasional work for the BBC. As he started preparing for production, he realized that the cuts to the story's budget would make production difficult. To worsen things, Bromley quickly clashed with Tom Baker. Now in his sixth season, Baker had become known for his attempts to control the production, we'll say.
Oh boy.
In contrast, Bromley had a very old-fashioned and authoritarian approach to directing, which set the two egos on a crash course with each other. Another concern that emerged during rehearsals was the drug aspect of Nightmare of Eden. Although Adams advocated for this element, Williams was worried that it would be unsuitable for a family-oriented show like Doctor Who. His concerns were shared by some of the series' regulars, particularly Lalla Ward, who was adamant that anything that might appear to glamorize drugs should be avoided. Consequently, various instances of drug terminology were amended to sound far less exciting. Most notably, the substance at the center of the story was originally called xylophyllin, or XYP, and nicknamed Zip. This was changed to Vraxoin, or Vrax for short, although K9's dialogue in Part 1 still referred to it by its originally scripted name. Before we talk about recording, which is a trip in itself, a quick note on Bromley's behind-the-scenes team. Of course, we have Dudders and J&T continuing in their roles as composer and production unit manager, respectively. No surprise there. As designer, we have Roger Can, who makes his first and only contribution to the show. He's also known for his work on Blake 7, Last of the Summer Wine, and Silent Witness. And then as costumer, we have the return of Rupert Jarvis, who had previously contributed costumes for Season 15's Underworld and Season 16's The Stones of Blood. Anyway, on to recording. Nightmare of Eden was recorded in 2 3-day blocks, both of which took place at BBC Television Centre Studio 6 in White City, London. Bromley had originally planned to record the serial practically in story order, which had been the traditional way of making the show until the mid-70s. If you think back, I think it was season 11 Barry Letts brought in those changes. However, Bromley was ultimately convinced to proceed on a set-by-set basis, as was now the norm on Doctor Who. Bromley was also unprepared for the extent to which the show now utilised special effects and for the generally faster pace of modern storytelling. During the second recording block, Bromley made several changes to the recording schedule and was uncompromising in dictating how he wanted the actors to perform. An exasperated Tom Baker began to shout insults towards the production gallery, leading to an argument on the studio floor, and Graham Williams had to be called upon to intervene. Not good. The situation became much worse on the final day of production. With Tom Baker in open revolt, Bromley completed work on some further sequences in the corridors before, during the supper break, informing Graham Williams that he was walking away from the production. With too little time to find a replacement director, Williams was himself forced to step in to direct the remaining material, which included scenes in the corridors, the interface, and the elevator area. By the end of the day, production assistant Carolyn Montague had procured t-shirts bearing the slogan, "I'm relieved the nightmare is over." which she distributed among the cast and crew. With the blame for everything placed entirely on Alan Bromley's shoulders, it was agreed that Williams would complete the post-production work on the serial, and that Bromley would never again be invited back to Doctor Who, and he retired from television soon after. The finished serial was televised between the 24th of November and the 15th of December 1979. Unlike its production, there was nothing dramatic about its broadcast. That being said, the production of Nightmare of Eden would mark the beginning of a changing of the guard behind the scenes on the show. Not only would this be Bob Baker's final contribution, but it also inspired both Graham Williams and Douglas Adams to walk away from the show at the end of the season. Adams was frustrated by the struggle to recruit new writers to the show, and he had realized that he much preferred working on his own projects rather than cultivating other people's scripts. And he was now developing further iterations of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy for different media, which left him very little time for other work. Williams, on the other hand, was coming to the end of 3 very difficult years on Doctor Who. Following the troubles on making Nightmare of Eden, he had finally had enough, but more on that to come next episode. Before we discuss the story, the short summary is with me this episode. We have a needlessly complex story that involves crashing spaceships, conservation attempts, insurance discussions, and idiot cops, all just to deliver an anti-drug message. Just remember, kids, drugs are bad. If you take them, you will crash hard and die. All right, let's talk about it. Part 1.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that when I saw that opening and you see all those people wearing the same outfit on a spaceship with sunglasses on, I couldn't help but think, this is what the Heaven's Gate cult was hoping for.
This is the future that Heaven's Gate wanted.
This is what they were imagining. Exactly this right here. But in all honesty, it was a little confusing with this basically bumper bruiser of an accident between 2 spaceships. I mean, the planet looked nice, but it didn't really read right. You know what I mean?
The model work was ropey as well, particularly when I just finished editing our episode on City of Death, and we were extremely praising of the special effects and the model work in City of Death. And this looks terrible.
Yes.
And that was just 2 stories before.
Yes. I had some things about the music, and it's so over the top, but it works because everything else is disastrous. Just like the opening shots and some of that, I was just like, it felt very 80s, honestly, with some of that music. Not synth heavy, but just the rest of it. I was just like, yep, I know exactly where we're at right now.
Right. And I was lost with this throughout the entire time. Can someone explain to me the materialization here? So we have 2 spaceships.
Yes.
They've kind of had a bumper bruiser, a crash, whatever you want to call it. But then one is arguably kind of phased in with the other one, but it's still holding matter and what? I don't really quite understand. Like, it phased into reality, and now they're kind of on top of each other. I couldn't help but think of that conspiracy that the USS, not the Indianapolis, there was another ship where they apparently were experimenting with dimension travel, and like it phased in, phased out, and it was horrible because people got phased into walls and stuff. I don't understand how that's not happening here and why that's even happening at all. Why not just have them, I guess, crash? It just didn't make much sense.
If I was to try and headcanon this away, it's something to do with jumping into hyperspace or what have you.
Okay. All right, I can go with that.
Phasing out of reality to travel faster than light, effectively. So there was like a crash as one jumped into hyperspace, which is why there's that intersection between them, like the unstable whatever it was. That's how I'm headcanoning it, at least.
Woo, headcanon, my favorite.
It's always such a sign of strong writing when you have to headcanon aspects of a story.
Oh, and it was the Philadelphia experiment. It was the USS Eldridge that supposedly had this.
Okay, I also had a question. So they're wearing this protective gear, right? Because I believe it's from sun radiation or any sort of radiation. I don't know exactly what it was, but their faces weren't covered. So I have lots of questions of, I'm going to cover up my entire body and my eyes, but the skin on my face is going to be fine.
Don't think about it too hard.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, is it Secker? Right? That's the guy we get introduced to. Who
The co-pilot who's high as shit. Yeah.
that face not just high, but like creepy high.
Mm-hmm.
He was very, very, very creepy. I don't know that that's exactly what they wanted to go for, because the captain has a very different reaction later, I think, in some ways. But yeah, it was something special.
Yeah, and we have that going on. And while we're running around and he's running around, I think the sets are looking pretty good here. You know, we were complaining about the model work, but the sets themselves, I thought it really gave a good impression. Maybe not so much with our kind of tedious stairway chase, which I wouldn't have been surprised was filmed in like the offices of the BBC.
Yeah.
But other than that, it looked good. And of course, later on with the sets, they did that wonderful trick of, while going from one passenger compartment to another, just reusing the set and just changing the numbers on it. A nice little trick, but effective.
I did think the bridge on the Empress was kind of shoddy as a set. But other than that, the sets in this story were very good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk about Rig and Dimmond. So firstly, Rig, shout out to David Dacre, who we previously saw as Irongron in The Time Warrior.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a flashback for you. I thought he was great.
Yeah.
I think the one thing this story does well is you don't really figure out who's up to mischief until part 3.
I will give you that, but I think with Dimmond, he is the beginning of the problems with this serial. And I'm not down on this serial too bad at all. But the problem with Dimmond is that he seems as a character rather uninspired. It's very two-dimensional, I think. Even with the twist, it seems two-dimensional because he seems like he's a grumpy SOB to start. And then when the reveal is like, oh, and he's a drug-dealing SOB on top of it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's boring enough, you know, all he cares about is his spaceship and money and so on. That you don't really care at first. He's almost just in the background for the first 2 episodes. All he wants to do is get his ship out of this predicament. So I kind of like that. He fades into the background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it does lead to that amazing and thrilling conversation about insurance that him and Rick have.
Oh my God.
I know what will hook the kids. Insurance.
Yeah, a car accident. They were in the writer's room and they said, you know, what's a good premise, a good start to a Doctor Who episode? How about something as earthly and mundane as a car accident?
I kind of like that, though, because I feel like a lot of people watching this will have been in that situation.
Oh, yeah. It's relatable.
In real life at some point. They've made this relatable, which is kind of cool. But it is also an argument about insurance.
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like we need to talk about the other half of our plot here, which is Tryst and the projector.
Can I say, I fucking love Tryst.
Okay.
The accent is so wonderfully bad.
Oh, yeah, that's no question about that.
And the dialogue is fucking hilarious. There's that point when he and Romana are talking about the expedition and his crew members, and he goes, to begin with, there was 10, but then we lost 1. Romana's like, how? And Tryst goes, he died. How did he die? He died. It's like, the guy's just an idiot talking about Professor Stein. He was my mentor. We worked on this idea together before he died, of course. Then we stopped. It's comedy gold.
Oh.
I have a love-hate relationship with Tryst, but like I knew very early on that it was him. Especially with the whole he died. Oh, he just died. I was like, yeah, no. So I caught on to the Tryst side of it very quickly.
Well, that's the type of responsibility and leadership you need in a person heading an expedition. One of their people dies and they just are like, oh, they died. I don't really know. Am I going to investigate? I'm going to figure this out? No.
Let's talk about the CET. So this is Tryst's invention based on research from Professor Stein. And tell me it's not just the miniscope from Carnival of Monsters.
Yeah. But, you know, I like it, except for the fact that it was underutilized. Maybe I wanted Carnival of Monsters again, but I really would have loved for them to be jumping in and out of different locations with this machine. Instead, we just get Eden. And I understand that because that's a lot to do in 4 episodes, and that's not what this serial is about. And we have to keep in contact with the ship because that's our pressing dilemma.
And budget.
Yes, and budget.
Yeah, it would have been nice to have a bit more, but yeah, I get it. There's little points in expending the budget on what would be more than just 10 seconds of footage.
I wish we could have been in Eden a little bit more and it not just be run from monster, run from monster.
Yeah, Eden looks great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It does.
It is clearly a studio jungle, but equally it's lit really well to make it just about believable. I really like what they did with it.
Right. Speaking of Run from Monster, this first episode really does set you up for expecting a great creature. And as I was watching, I was getting excited and I said, please don't disappoint me. And I'm slightly disappointed as he pops out of the paneling.
Yeah.
And the ship, it's not a great look. And it's funny because it isn't necessarily a budget issue. I've seen the show present good guy in monster costumes before. This one is just not a great design.
No, it's not. Just looking through this first episode and thinking back before we move on to part 2, since you bring up the cliffhanger, Riley, this does seem like kind of typical Bob Baker and previously Dave Martin problem in that there's just a lot being thrown at the wall here. We've got the spaceship crash. We've got what it first appears to be a drug investigation story. We've got these monsters coming out. We've got whatever's going on in Eden because Romana spots the face in Eden before she gets knocked out. And then you've got Tryst acting kind of shady. It feels in part 1 that there are a lot of very disparate elements that don't quite tie together, and they do tie them together, but it does feel a bit messy to me.
Well, you say messy. I say, at least at the beginning, it was interesting. I feel that this is one of those serials where the premise is, despite making fun of it being a car accident that starts everything off, I think that's a decent premise, actually. They do okay, and then when they add all these little elements, we have monsters, we have this projection, we have who is this person that's running around. I mean, so much going on. We have drugs, we have the passengers are getting upset. A lot has happened. It is quite an array of things, but that's interesting to me. It made me wonder how they were going to tie it all in.
And because they were able to tie it all in, I think it makes it a bit better because I didn't feel like there was a lot of dangling threads like we've had in some cases in the past. And considering budget things and stuff, this is honestly probably the most tame of the Bristol half boys, I guess.
The Bristol half boys.
The Bristol lad.
This is considerably, I think, lower in crazy than they've done before.
Yeah, I would love to have seen what the original version of this script might have looked like, but sadly I couldn't find anything on that. All right, let's talk about part 2.
Right. Anthony, I have a question for you. As we go into episode 2, this is where one of the messages or the message of the serial comes very clear. Drugs are bad. Okay. And it's 1979.
Yes.
Was there already a push of a strong focus on drugs in English society or in the English government at that time? Like a real focus on clamping down on it. Drug abuse, drug addiction in 79.
I'm not 100% sure. I mean, obviously, in the 60s, there was LSD and marijuana were becoming big things. But I think a lot of what we have in the modern day, and particularly in terms of mass production, you weren't really seeing mass-produced opioids or opiates at this point. You weren't seeing mass-produced things like cocaine. Those things, I think, were starting to creep into British society, but they didn't really become big problems until club culture in the 90s, where ecstasy and MDMA and that kind of thing started to really take off. And I know in the last 10, 15 years, cocaine has become a big, big problem in Britain. But in 79, it was probably the beginnings of a revival of drug culture.
See, it's funny to me, as I saw this and it was 1979, it really just felt like a precursor for the upcoming $1 trillion war on drugs that was started under Reagan in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Yeah. And anyway, does anyone know who won that war? I think drugs did.
Let's be honest, there's a lot of wars that we don't really know who won those.
I don't know. I think drugs won in a blowout on that one.
Hey, blowout.
Hey-o.
All right. I have a couple things to go in this beginning that's a little bit different than the drug stuff. But I find a few things very interesting and a few witty things that are callbacks and things. And I love how the doctor's like, I don't work for anybody. except for, that time when you had to work with Unit because you got stuck there because you pissed off the Time Lords.
And the White Guardian.
The White Guardian that you just got done with. Or, those other times where I guess you were doing it for yourself, but showing off to the master, yeah, that was your own fault. So it's like, but you do sometimes work for some people, Doctor.
He was just showing off.
Yeah, I do like to call him out sometimes.
The thing with that point, that kills me. So he's tried to come up with a cover story.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so I work for this insurance agency. Well, that insurance agency was liquidated however many years ago. And Rig just gives him the perfect opportunity. Hey, you're an agent, aren't you? And he goes, no, I don't work for anybody. I'm just having fun. Like, bro, you should have just said yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, why did you need the cover story to begin with?
Also, I was unsure of who actually was getting drugged because it kept on going back and forth a little bit of who was getting which cup of things and whatnot. But the fact that the captain gets drugged is kind of hilarious.
I'm really sad because we know that Vraxoin kills and Rig is just doing the best he can.
Well, we know that it kills, but is it just from one dose? Is it from having multiple? Like, I don't know exactly how it works.
Yeah, and it clearly is from just having one dose because he does die.
That's a horrible drug.
Yeah, I was going to say, why would anyone take it?
Well, no, I mean, like, how do you make money off of it? Because you don't get repeat customers. You just kill all your customers immediately off one dose.
It's really trying to make that anti-drug message and really hammer it home. But in doing so, it destroys the integrity of the plot.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what Julia was saying regarding to the dosing of the drink, did anyone else have any sort of confusion with how that was shot? Because I couldn't quite understand where that other hand came from.
Yeah.
Like, was that little, I don't know what you would call it, pickup window? Did it have access to the other room as well? Like there was the window that connected both rooms, that's where the arm came from? Because I couldn't figure out where the hell that thing came from.
Yeah, no, that wasn't shot well.
Yeah.
Nope.
And I know we had already discussed Tryst, but I want to go in a little bit further with him. While you found him to be amusing and Julia has a love-hate relationship with Tryst, I have wondered now, what is the obsession with this show when having scientists on that not only do they have a very strong accent of some sort, they are played by English people doing that accent. I kind of beg the show to just have the scientist played by a person with an English accent and just have them have an English accent. It's fine. You don't need to make them Russian or Italian. It just, to me, it seems kind of unnecessary. And in this case, Tryst is such a ridiculous character to me, and not necessarily in a fun way, because it's like watching bad stand-up guy do an impersonation of an Italian person, but it just seems to fall really flat, and you can't take the character seriously so much to a point where you don't even want to pay attention to him because you just kind of keep rolling your eyes. At least that's how I felt about it.
Firstly, I am going to defend my boy, not Tryst, but my boy, Professor Zaroff.
Okay, yeah. No, you can do it once. You can do it once.
And Joseph First was actually Austrian.
Fair enough.
So with that, I'm going to defend. I think the reason for the enjoyment of Eastern European scientists, you think culturally at this time, Einstein is still very much in the popular imagination. He'd only been dead for about 20 years. And you had the brain drain going on from Eastern Europe. You'd had a lot of scientists who'd fled the Nazis who were still out and around and doing work. So it kind of makes sense given the cultural context, but to continuously hire English people and have them put on bad accents, I agree, Riley. It does start to stretch credulity. And I do want to point out, Louis Fiander, who plays Tryst, I still can't quite believe this. He had been in a 1967 version of Pride and Prejudice on TV playing Mr. Darcy.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
No.
And he didn't play him with an Italian accent, though? No?
No. I mean, Colin Firth, he is not.
Absolutely not. I wanted to talk about a couple things. So I know after hearing some of that behind the scenes stuff, there was a lot of commentary about who was directing what. And so it sounded like some of the corridor stuff and maybe some of those stairway things, because when they were going up and down some of those stairs, the doctor was, and those weird angle shots of like feet and some other things, some of it was fine. And then some of it I was like, I don't know how I feel about that.
I was getting flashbacks to the endless staircase scenes in the Invasion of Time. With the chase scene, I do want to note +1 to the Jelly Baby count because he gives one to a passenger.
Yes.
So first Jelly Baby since Destiny of the Daleks. Shout out to that. But poor Rig. I mean, he's just getting higher and higher, and we know he's going to die.
Right.
I liked him.
I did too. As I've made clear, I'm not a fan of the supporting characters in this serial, but I do like him a lot as a character.
I think it's part 2 where Tryst really starts to act kind of sus. Julie, you called it in part 1, but in part 2, Rig says something about drug smugglers, and Tryst kind of gives him a look and says, drug smuggling? That's a little bit sus, Tryst. And then later on, as they're talking about it, he's trying to place blame elsewhere. He's saying, well, I think it was Stott, and then he must have passed the drugs on to Della. He's deflecting a little bit too much right now.
Is the whole like blaming Della, and it's just, really?
Yeah.
This is how we're going to do this? Although, don't get me started on Della. I'm not a super big fan of Della.
I want to get you started on Della.
Yeah,
Do
me
it.
too. She's a little bit foxy, but I want to hear your opinions.
I don't think she exudes a lot of emotion. And so I think there were just some times when I'm just like, girl, you just seem like you don't care that much about
Maybe she's
Stott.
taking some Fraxoan.
Not that much. I don't think she's that. I don't know. There's just something weird about how she approached that character, I think. And also just her blindness to Tryst. Even if he wasn't doing the drug smuggling, the guy's an idiot. So there just seems something off about that whole thing.
And there are clear ethical violations with Tryst.
Oh, 100%.
Even if there weren't drugs involved, the Doctor calls it out. He is capturing live creatures and putting them in this machine. You know, maybe you could look at Tryst's sketchy behavior, particularly in episode 1, as trying to be fiercely protective of his very dodgy work. But yeah, as time goes by, he is becoming increasingly shifty and kind of dumb with it. But I love him. All right, as we're heading to the end of this episode, we meet Fisk and Costa.
Oh boy.
Oh my God.
Now, they're effectively cops. I forget what they call them.
Excise agents.
Excise agents, right. So they're like customs people, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oy.
Yeah, this is where the serial starts kind of going downwards a bit. But I would like to point out that the uniforms for them look like something out of the Al Pacino movie Cruising. And if you don't get that reference, look it up.
I'm definitely going to have to look that up.
And you'll be happy that you did.
The costumes in this are very heavily sequined.
Yes.
Lots of sequins.
The glitter and sequins, it's insane.
Yeah.
It's how you, for a uniform as an excise agent or a police officer, a customs agent, what do you want to call it? It demands respect.
No notes, Riley. 100% agree. We should kit out all of our cops in that right now. But yeah, serious props to the costumer here. Love that. All right, so they're about to arrest the Doctor and Romana after they find traces of Raxo in his pocket, and they scramble out of there and jump into the CET machine, and that is our cliffhanger, and we're into part 3.
Guess what? Super long ass recap.
Oh my God, yes. Wow.
2.5 minutes into the episode, and we finally get to something new.
I knew you'd be mad.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Chili's gonna be so pissed.
In some ways, I get it. Obviously, they're not watching things back to back and everything, but it was just long.
Yeah.
You could have cut some of that beginning part out and it would have been totally fine. There are a few fun quips. Hey, we're going to go east. Why isn't it north? Well, I guess we could call it north. That part was rather fun. And again, we get into Eden, and I really love the design of Eden, and I wish we spent more time there.
Agreed.
What about the man-eating plant, eh?
Ugh.
It was so gross.
Yeah.
We love aggressive vegetation in Doctor Who.
We do. But that green plant fluid spraying, that was unnecessary.
Yeah, I was okay with the plant trying to eat him, but the squirting juice stuff was no bueno.
It makes me think back to Planet of the Daleks, Riley, and you talking about how gross that story sounded.
Yeah. I couldn't help but think of maybe Double Dare or any of those other Nickelodeon shows with just the green slime.
Yeah.
I had a question of how in the world did the monster miss them when they were sitting there? sometimes when they do some of those angle shots, it's just, it's within eyesight. So I don't understand, but it is what it is.
That's just classic to what this appears to be, which is kind of like a B-movie monster movie. And if you watch any of those from the 50s and 60s, that's exactly what happens. A person in the suit, bumbling along, barely able to turn around or move quickly, just kind of going, "Ugh," and then our characters slipping out from underneath them. It's just par for the course, I guess.
Yeah, and I love me some 1950s B movies. And to be honest, I enjoy this story a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Stott, because we finally meet him, and he's been hanging out in the CET for half a year.
I want to know what he's eating.
Yeah, he's eating the green plant juice.
Well, the doctor did say the root from that man-eating plant was tasty.
Yeah, there you go.
He's forcibly adopted a plant-based diet.
I actually enjoy Stott as a character.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoy that. The whole, I'm trying to figure out this whole thing, and he decided to lay low, and that's why he's still there and everything. I'm like, okay, I'm good with this Stott character.
And he's definitely not the drug dealer because he's investigating the drug running.
Mm-hmm.
And says that Tryst's a fool and that he knows nothing. It's like, no, Tryst knows everything.
Tryst knows everything. One thing. Why in the world does K9 have to sniff Stott?
Oh.
Yeah, that was bad. That was a very questionable production decision.
Yeah.
There's a couple things with K9 that I had a lot of questions about because I'm surprised we haven't touched on them yet. K9 seems to make some really weird, dumb decisions, which is very out of character for K9.
Yeah, and that's disappointing because this is written by the guy who created K9.
It's kind of been a rough season for K9, especially when looking back to before, like, for example, his valiant stand in Stones of Blood. It seems like we've had quite a drop-off.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, he started this season with laryngitis and thus being cut out of Destiny to the Daleks. He hates French people, so he wasn't in City of Dare. And then in Creature from the Pit, he kept getting bundled by rolling hairy balls. And on top of that, he has that terrible voice. Sorry, David Briley.
Yep.
Not a good season for K9.
One thing I find interesting, so we talked about being on a lot of budgetary concerns and things of that nature. So I'm very surprised by the fact that they had, I believe, 5 mandrill outfits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All of varying heights.
I mean, whatever they did with whatever little budget they had, aside from some very iffy model shots, I think for the most part, this story looks good. We already talked about the sets. The mandrills, are they perfect looking monsters? No, but they're not terrible. And as you say, Julie, there are 5 costumes. Like, yeah, this doesn't scream cheap to me in the way that, like, Underworld or the Sunmakers did.
Now let's talk about the mandrills a little bit more. So I was always questioning exactly, are we supposed to feel bad for them? Are they just mindless monsters? Are they misunderstood? All those types of things. And then lo and behold, they're Vrex.
Yeah, but that's not their fault.
Yeah, and so it's just one of those things where I'm like, they're poor, just little misunderstood monsters who they're trapped in this place. They get out, and so now they're just mad at everyone. I kind of get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally Team Mandrill on this entire serial. That's kind of how, very similar to Rig in my favorite part of the entire serial, when he's fully off his ass on Vrax, and they're attacking the passengers, and he's just laughing his ass off. I really enjoyed that scene because I had literally the same reaction as Rig did as it was happening. And I said, I can relate to this guy.
But you weren't high off your tits.
I wasn't on Vrax, no, but I feel you, Rig. It was hilarious and it was a lot of fun, and I was totally Team Mandrill.
I almost feel like that's very telling. Like, he's making the same commentary as the viewers are.
Yeah, I feel like that was intentional.
And then you feel a bit bad for it because you realize you're not high.
No, I didn't feel bad about it.
There was a point where I then started to think, it's so obvious that it's Tryst. So is it actually Tryst? I did hit that little piece for a bit there. Since I had figured it out in part 1, I was like, there's got to be some sort of like spin or turn and things like that. But that's when we find out that it's the guy from the other ship. That was the actual twist for me. But yeah, Tryst still remains sus the entire time.
It's when you see Tryst and Dimmond talking. That's the moment.
See, that didn't get me. The twist that I enjoyed was that the mandrels are Vrax, or when they're toasted and cremated, they're Vrax. That I thought was interesting, and I feel like that could have been a subject that could have been delved in a little bit further. Instead, we kind of immediately move off of that and really focus more on the whodunit element of it more than the ethical considerations of a creature that, when killed, would be turned into a substance that is highly addictive. That, I think, had some potential there.
Yeah.
And I hate to bring it back up again, but we go really deep into the phasing in and out element here towards the end of part 3.
I mean, that's literally the cliffhanger, so yes.
So yes, Romana is going to push the button to begin the separation, and our excise agent, very annoying little man who won't let her do anything, even press a button, even though it kind of just recovers 2 ships that had crashed, threatens her life. And then we have our phasing and a whole bunch of this and that. She does it. Insanity ensues. Doctor comes running out and just disappears. And in that effect, I couldn't help but think when I saw it was, look who got access to a video effects board. And they're going to have fun with it. Here we go.
They're definitely going to have fun with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
Part 4?
Part 4. Well, hang on. I do want to talk briefly about Romana, because she's part of this trying to demerge the ships, and Fisk is in the room. He shoots Rig from rescuing Romana from his increasing violence, and Fisk tells her she's going to be executed for drug running, and then he threatens to shoot her if she's going to touch the controls, and her response is, well, I thought you were going to kill me anyway. And at that point, I'm just like, yes, Romana, I fucking love you.
That was a great scene for her, but I want to get the temperature here. Julie, how do you feel about Romana so far?
She's still just okay to me.
Agreed.
I don't hate her. I don't think she's down at Dodo level or anything of that nature at all. But
I was damning with faint praise.
I know. But, I mean, she's just nowhere remotely close to Romana 1. Mary Tam is
agreed completely. Yeah.
Perfect.
I mean, you know, Mary Tam's my girl. But I will give Lala Ward some props here. I think Romana 2 is beginning to grow on me.
I'll say beginning to grow, but I think it's a little bit lower of a level than for you, Anthony.
I have no concept. Is there I'm assuming there is a Romana debate amongst fandom here?
No, most fans would see Romana 2 as the superior. She seems to be the preferred Romana in fandom.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it yet.
Okay, Riley, it'll be me and you against the world.
That's right.
Perfect. All right, here's where we find out about some of that smuggling. But I have a question about this.
Hang on, are we into part 4?
I would like to be in part 4. Okay, I have a question about the smuggling thing. So the smuggling has already started and has been happening.
Yes.
But I don't remember there being like a history of these ships being kind of anywhere remotely near each other or things of that nature.
Don't ask difficult questions, Julie.
Okay, so I was just wondering how the smuggling was happening before this other ship was really around, but I guess it's fine.
The only way it works is if there'd been a longer-term relationship between Dimmond and Tryst. I mean, it's made clear that the Hecate Dimmond ship was not meant to be in that sector when it happened. So the whole thing seems kind of coordinated and deliberate, so that they do encounter each other. So you kind of have to assume this has been going on for a while.
Yes, it's just, I guess the mistake was that they actually landed on top of each other. Maybe in the past, they had just been near-ish each other and were able to do some of the smuggling. I don't know. That's just where I got a little bit confused.
Yeah, that's the only way it works.
All right. Now, we do get some canine dick shots.
I did notice he was going more for the chest, I thought. There were a few dick shots, but for the most part...
It was mostly chest shots, but for one of the mandrels, it was a dick shot. Yep, just one of them. So I got my one per episode, so I'm happy.
Well, that's all that matters, is that you're happy when there are dick shots. As we're heading through this, I mean, this is the wrap-up episode. It kind of goes exactly as you'd expect it to go, given the build-up. I do want to say Fisk is an idiot. Like, he is constantly falling for whatever Tryst feeds him. I mean, Tryst tells Fisk that the doctor went into projection to make the pickup for the Vrax. Okay, Tryst, you're deflecting so much here. And when Fisk asks why did he separate the ships, Tryst responds with, perhaps it is because, as you say, he is a criminal. And Fisk just buys it. There's no logic behind that statement. And Fisk is just like, yes, that sounds good. Good God, he is an idiot. How did he get a job? And yet somehow he thinks he is going to get promoted out of this.
Right. He thinks he's going to get promoted off of what would be just a standard pullover drug confiscation. Instead, he's having many passengers murdered by giant creatures. That does not look like a promotion. That looks like things got out of hand. You weren't able to control it. You should be demoted or fired.
Yeah.
And then I love when Stott comes in and he's like, hey, this is what I'm doing. It's not the doctor. Hands over his ID card. And then all of a sudden, Fisk is just 100% on board with whatever the doctor says. Like, sir, you're an idiot that you just fall in line. It just seemed very bit off character for him. I don't know.
I'm thinking these guys got assigned to this job because they are the worst of the worst. Like, they are clearly the lowest performing cops in the entire excise system. And they're like, we don't care about this job that much. We'll throw these idiots at it and just hope for the best. And, you know, maybe they'll get themselves killed.
Okay, so we have this Enchuka laser that we're having to deal with and everything. So the doctor and Romana are busy doing that. We have Della deciding that, you know how I'm going to do some of this is I'm just going to go up into Tryst's face and call him out on it. But I'm going to do it by myself.
Yeah, that was a stupid move.
Oh. That's another reason why she's not my favorite. She's not the brightest of people around. Fine, I guess.
And then Dimon shoots her because he's a dick.
But she's not dead.
No, just wounded. I do think Tryst trying to explain himself is interesting because he does seem to genuinely believe this is for the greater good. He seems to believe it's to fund his work, to fund the expedition. And he has this ethos of conservation. And I kind of love Della's response, you know, millions of people will be going extinct. That's kind of more serious. And his response is, it's different. They have a choice, which is something that is later echoed by the Doctor and Romana. They do say he's right on that. They do have a choice on whether or not to take Vrax. Unless you're Rig, who didn't have a choice. Poor Rig.
This is a perfect example of what I meant by the war on drugs as precursors, because this is the beginning of that concept of, are the people that have drug issues, are they the criminal or are they a victim of the drug?
Yeah.
And with this mentality, it puts the blame on the person. Are we really going to want to punish someone because they made the mistake of trying something once? And it feels like that's what he's trying to say here, which is, in my opinion, kind of shit.
And in this case, you try it once and you die anyway.
Right. Yeah. It's like, why blame them? It's just, they're a victim to the chemistry.
It's not the best laid out plot, is it?
Well, it's not necessarily the plot. It's just the hinted message there. I mean, I'm fine with promoting, don't do drugs. That's fine. Yeah, of course, do that. But that idea seems like that precursor of like, maybe these people should die or maybe they should be criminalized for doing it. It just seems, like I said, the beginnings of that crap that I had to live through the 80s.
Yeah, and I can kind of see, even if I don't agree with it, I can see why this is a kid's show, so they don't want to be seen to be encouraging any form of drugs. So I get the mentality behind the messaging, even if the messaging is kind of off.
I imagine how wonderful and amazing it would be if the Doctor could have just done was it Bill Nighy, that actor, his line from Love Actually, don't buy drugs, kids, be a rock star, they'll give them to you for free.
Yes.
If the Doctor said that, that would have been amazing. But anyway.
Save the universe and they give them to you for free. All right, let's talk about getting the mandrels back into the CET.
It's adorable. It's adorable, at least.
It's adorable.
Firstly, the poor mandrels getting periodically shot in order to keep them in line. Poor little things. They just want head scratches and to be told they're good boys.
Right.
And then the Doctor shows up with the dog whistle and Pied Pipers them back into the CET. And then we get that fucking line.
Oh,
Oh, my fingers, my arms, my legs, my everything.
Yeah. That's a Bugs Bunny joke.
That is somewhere where they should have toned down Tom.
Yes. There's a couple places in this, but that was, I think, the biggest one. I think it's mostly just some of his facial expressions get a little bit too crazy. But yeah, that was a bit much.
It is literally a Looney Tunes joke. The person getting torn to pieces by, let's say, the Tasmanian devil or some other creature behind a corner that you don't see. Articles of clothing being, shot out from behind the corner of where it's happening. It's a classic gag, but it's just too Looney Tunes for the show.
Agreed. And again, don't get me wrong, I loves me some Looney Tunes, and we have loved the Bugs Bunny Tom Baker, but I do feel like this is one step too far, and I do suspect that this was them letting Tom do whatever he wanted.
Yeah, it works with the wit. It doesn't work with the physical comedy.
Right. So we capture Tryst and Dimmond through CET machinery shenanigans that the Doctor and Romana do. Cool. I want to talk about the final scene with Tryst and the Doctor.
Oh, Tryst and the Doctor. Okay.
Because I love the way Tom plays that. After it is tonally inconsistent from the Bugs Bunny scene, but Tryst is trying to explain himself. I didn't really want to be involved. I needed to fund my research, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And the Doctor, without even looking at him, just goes, go away. And it's so bubbling, seething anger. It's so well done. I really love it.
I wish it had actually ended there.
You mean rather than a quip about humans in a zoo?
Yes. I hated that joke. It landed poorly. I did not like how that ended. And I'm like, man, you had that great moment before about just the go away. And now we made a very uncomfortable joke about humans being in an electric zoo.
Yep.
Did not land well for me.
No. Well, that's the end of our story. So, I will agree, though, Julia. It seemed like an odd way to end it. Let's insult the audience. I feel like you want your heroes to, well, neither of them are human. You kind of want them to be sympathetic to us. And that line takes that away. We're meant to be the Doctor's favorite species. He's even said so by this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, quick rundown. No I'll explain laters, no quarries, because we're all in the studio. And we had one jelly baby.
Camp count?
How many camp count points does this deserve?
The excise officer's uniforms, that's definitely at least 1 point.
I feel like Tryst's accent.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I want to give a half point to, what's his name? The Secker.
Yeah.
Half a point.
Half a point to Secker. I think Tryst deserves more than just 1 point.
Agreed.
So, taking into consideration the costumes, taking into consideration the mandrels.
So 4?
I'm going to make an executive decision. We're going with 5.
Oh.
Wow. Okay.
Going with 5 for this one. I feel like this is just as campy as City of Death. All right, let's go ahead and rate this one. And Riley, you have the privilege of going first this time.
There's a good basis here. I think what hurts this serial is, with the exception of Rig, of course, and Stott, is the supporting characters. Dimmond, Bella, Tryst. Secker, I guess, because he's one-dimensional. They seem really flat and uninspired. Out of all of them, I think the main issue is, though, with Tryst. It's a mistake for it to be such a over-the-top Italian caricature, to be quite honest. It's hard to take him seriously.
Is he Italian or is he Eastern European? Sorry.
I thought he was Italian.
Okay. Who knows what he's meant to be? Carry on. Sorry.
Well, that's just, supports my point even further. Just then don't do the accent game. It's fine. Have Tryst be played by an Englishman with an English accent. It's fine. It didn't need to be done that way. And I brought this up earlier, and I hate to be this person, but Lala Ward isn't impressing me yet. She doesn't seem to have the confidence or screen presence so far. I feel like she's getting overshadowed in scenes. Now, that's very difficult to not get overshadowed, say, by Baker, because that's just kind of what he does. But it's not just with him. It seems like it happens so often with just supporting characters or if the monsters on the screen. That is something that's bothering me because I'm kind of missing a stronger companion, one that is a bit, I don't know. I felt like there was more of a back and forth between Mary Tam when she was Romana and the Doctor than what we have right now. It was like more of an even back and forth. This feels more like a complete bulldozing. Anyway, while I do love some monsters, the mandrels, while there was money put into the costume, the design itself was at best a C-. So, it's not a terrible serial, but not great. So you know where I'm going, right down the middle. I give this 5 protective coveralls out of 10.
All right, Julie, I'll let you go next.
All right. So this story had some good legs to stand on. I think that it didn't go too over the top with the script. There was enough interesting things going on without going too crazy. Knowing some of the budgetary concerns, I'm not going to dock them too much about not going into some of those other places in the CET. I do think that there were some issues. I think you could tell with some of the direction that there were some inconsistencies there, but we know why. And there's some over the topness and everything. But I think that this is more enjoyable than some of those others. So I'm going to be a little bit kinder than Riley was. So I'm going to give this one 6.5 misunderstood mandrels out of 10.
Well, I kind of low-key love this one. Objectively, I know it's not good. I know it has its problems. I know there's a whole lot of plot crammed in the way that only the Bristol Boys, or in this case, the Bristol lad, could do. You know, it's a little bit all over the place. And Tryst's accent, terrible, but I kind of love it. The mandrels, they're endearing to me. You know, again, not great, but I kind of love them. This story's just kind of bonkers and off the wall, and I can't deny that there's ambition there. I also find it to be a lot of fun. It's one of those ones that, for me, I think is comfort watching. Again, objectively, I know this is not the Robots of Death. Not by a long way, but I still enjoy it. So for me, this gets 7 totally incompetent cops out of 10, which gives us a story average of 6.17, which unfortunately makes it the second best of the season so far. This is not turning out to be the strongest season.
Ooh.
We'll see how that goes over the next few episodes. But that brings us to the end of this episode. We will be back next time as we head into a labyrinth for the Horns of Naimon. But until then, thank you as always for listening. And of course, as always, have a good one. You have been listening to Watchers in the Fourth Dimension with Riley Schreck, Julie Philippek, and myself, Anthony Williams. This episode, a thrilling conversation about insurance, was recorded on Sunday, the 25th of August, 2024. If this is your first time listening into the show, all of our previous episodes are available wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at @Watchers4D, and you can also email us at watchers4d@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, please do subscribe and consider leaving us a review or rating on your favorite podcasting app. All of those things really do help the show. And always remember, don't do drugs, kids, or you will die.